Picture this for a second. Imagine buying part of a $50 million commercial building. You know the kind, sweeping glass windows, a bustling lobby, sitting right in a prime downtown location. Typically, trying to get a piece of a transaction like that, well, it's pretty much reserved for massive institutional funds or billionaires. It's an asset class locked behind enormous, almost impossible financial walls for the average person.
Now, what if you could do it from your phone, literally in seconds? Imagine just completely bypassing the months of waiting, skipping the endless back-and-forth paperwork, and totally ditching the traditional closing process where stacks of documents just sit on someone's desk gathering dust. Imagine just tapping a button and instantly selling your ownership just as fast. Sounds crazy, right? But that future isn't science fiction. It's actually already happening.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into what a lot of experts are calling one of the biggest generational shifts in property ownership over the next decade. We're talking about real estate tokenization. We're going to look at how tokenized real-world assets could fundamentally disrupt how we invest in real estate, breaking down barriers that have literally existed for centuries.
Okay, let's dive right in. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover the liquidity problem, define what property tokenization actually is, explore smart contracts, highlight the fractional advantage, dig into the legal realities, and finally, look at the future of ownership.
Section 1. The Real Estate Liquidity Problem.
So to understand why tokenization is catching fire right now, we really have to look at the massive flaw real estate has always had. Traditionally, if you own a house, you can't just wake up tomorrow and say, hey, I'm going to sell 4% of my kitchen to cover a medical bill. It doesn't work that way. You have to find a buyer, hire agents, pay attorneys, sit through escrow, sign a mountain of documents, and wait weeks or even months to settle. It is painfully slow. Real estate is basically one of the least liquid assets on the planet. Tokenization, on the other hand, introduces fractional ownership that transfers so much more efficiently on digital platforms. So instead of just one owner, you could have hundreds or even thousands, which instantly and drastically lowers the barrier to entry.
Section 2. What is property tokenization?
How does this tech actually solve that massive liquidity problem? Well, real estate tokenization is basically representing ownership interests digitally using blockchain technology, which allows a property to be divided into much smaller fractional pieces. But here is what's really fascinating. It's what isn't happening. The physical building hasn't changed. The actual laws governing property ownership, they haven't vanished into thin air. It's only the method of representing and transferring those ownership interests that has evolved onto the blockchain. Think of it as a much-needed digital update to a very analog system. Let's put this into a real-world perspective. Traditionally, you might need a massive lump sum, say $500,000, just to buy a property outright or even just to meet a commercial down payment. But with tokenization, because that asset is sliced up into smaller digital pieces, you might only need a few $100s to buy a fractional interest. Now, obviously, this assumes the offering complies with all the relevant securities and property laws, but the core shift here is all about accessibility. The amount of capital you need drops drastically.
Section 3. Smart Contracts and Automation.
How is all of this actually pulled off? Well, the real game changer isn't just the digital token itself, it's the smart contract sitting right behind it. A smart contract is simply computer code that automatically executes predetermined instructions once specific conditions are met. Think of it kind of like a giant, super secure digital vending machine. You put the money in, make your selection, and bam, the machine automatically dispenses the item. No human middleman required to facilitate the trade. Let's walk through how this automated flow works in practice, because it's pretty seamless. First, you buy an ownership interest, and your payment is instantly verified by the network. Second, the ownership record updates automatically, entirely based on the rules hard-coded into that smart contract. And finally, the transaction is permanently recorded on the blockchain. No one is manually moving paper folders from desk to desk. Some platforms are even looking at automating dividend payouts and compliance checks using these exact same programmable contracts. It literally reimagines the entire back-office process.
Section 4. The Fractional Ownership Advantage.
This right here is where we see a huge shift in the traditional American dream of real estate. For decades, the standard playbook was save up 20%, lock into a 30-year mortgage on a single property, and just cross your fingers that it appreciates. And hey, for a primary home, that still makes total sense. But imagine building a modern investment portfolio where you own a slice of an apartment complex in Texas, a warehouse in Tennessee, student housing down in Florida, medical offices in Arizona, and some commercial retail in Nevada. With fractional ownership, instead of dumping every single dollar you have into one local housing market, you can instantly spread your risk across different states and totally different commercial sectors. It makes massive portfolio diversification super accessible.
Now, because of all this newfound accessibility, you are going to hear some pretty incredible claims online, like this one. 40% of Gen Z already prefers fractional ownership. Sounds amazing, right? I mean, it perfectly fits the whole narrative of this young, tech-savvy generation completely revolutionizing the market. But we really need to pump the brakes right here. That exact 40% figure, it is incredibly difficult to actually verify through authoritative public research. We absolutely should not be repeating it as an established fact without a rock-solid source. Now, is it true that younger investors and big institutional players are super interested in low-cost, digital, fractional assets? For sure. But we have to stick to verified facts. We cannot build a solid investment strategy based on internet lore.
Section 5. Challenges and Legal Realities.
Okay, it's time to step away from the hype for a minute. If someone tells you that blockchain magically solves every single problem in real estate overnight, tell them to slow down. Here is the reality check. Tokenization still faces some massive hurdles. For starters, different countries have wildly varying regulations. Also, just because you create a blockchain token does not mean you automatically have a liquid market. A lot of these assets still really struggle with limited secondary market liquidity. On top of that, investor protections vary widely, strict custody arrangements are a huge deal, and legal ownership rights have to be crystal clear. Bottom line, tokenization should never, ever be confused with guaranteed liquidity.
So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is this. Smart contracts do not replace your legal rights. They just automate pieces of a legal framework that already exists. Yes, the technology is advancing at lightning speed, but guess what? Property records still matter. Securities laws still completely govern these offerings. The tech is just catching up to smooth out the friction points, but it definitely doesn't overwrite the fundamental rule of law.
Section 6. The future of ownership.
So what do industry analysts actually see coming over the next decade? Most are pointing toward a huge expansion in this space, largely driven by serious institutional money. But keep in mind, it's an evolution, not an overnight revolution. Is every single property going to be tokenized by 2027? Probably not. Property law, traditional deeds, county recorders, those are sticking around. But what does change is how those ownership interests are represented, managed, and traded digitally. We are essentially watching the very beginning of a transition where digital ownership systems are starting to complement traditional real estate, literally building new financial infrastructure right on top of the old-school system.
Ultimately, the investors who truly understand both the cutting-edge tech and the traditional law are going to be in the absolute strongest position as this market evolves. Which brings us to this fantastic mic drop quote from our source material: read law, not lore. Don't get swept up in all the unverified internet hype. Understand the legal foundation of what you are actually buying, and then leverage the technology to your advantage.
Real estate isn't going anywhere. It is just becoming far more efficient, far more fractional, and way more accessible. We're looking at a massive shift from traditional illiquidity straight into the future of digital fractional ownership. So the final question I want to leave you with today is this: is your portfolio ready for the digital transition? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.